A true alchemist does not change lead into gold. He changed the world into words. Welcome back to the worldly word of investing wisdom with Durgesh Shah of Corporate Database and Vinod Sethi of Morgan Stanley formerly. Gentlemen, welcome back. Vinod, we were talking about the great stocks of your era. There were so many great stocks that you had in your portfolio. You were the first in so many of them. How did you judge whether this was an investable company, a great company? What were the criteria that you used?
Well, there were multiple criteria. One is your own inner voice as to the way India will sort of evolve. The other is a lot of homework. Those days we read dozens of balance sheets every day.
You still do, don't you?
I still read 3 balance sheets a day.
A day?
A day of any company in the world. This is just a habit. I think it just hones your skills a little bit. And combined with extensive visits. I think the combination of an internal voice, homework, and field visits helped us filter a lot of the noise in the system.
Durgesh, tell me a little bit of Vinod. We've talked about a lot of personalities. He's very self-effacing and modest, but he's a pretty colorful, unique way of looking at things.
I think, in fact, when you mentioned to him that, what was different and how did he get to know us and all kinds of things, I think it was on the street, there was this belief that there are some 2 kids coming out of the US who are like cowboys going around shooting companies and
we know
stuff
better
like that. And it was very, very unusual. The fact is, there was this UTI, there was this LIC, and there were these institutions who had their own way of measuring yields and book values and buying stocks. And here were these guys who had started visiting companies, started talking to people and buying companies by the dozen. So while LIC and UTI would give orders to brokers to buy small lots and collect over time, here were guys who were buying 5% to 15% of a company that they were allowed to. But it is his ability to see that Hero Honda will be in a position to make a dent into Bajaj Auto. At that time, most people thought that scooters will do very well. You need females could not drive motorcycles; they need saris, and you have to be sitting like this. Right. There was a premium to buying a scooter, and motorcycles were off the shelf, and all kinds of things. And they could see it very clearly that Honda has 50% of the global market. They'll figure out a product for India. They will know how to go about it over time. And they went about their homework really well. So, I mean, even today, I would think that if the portfolio that he created at that time, buying 5 to 15% in companies like Infosys, Hero Honda, PHEL, Z, Concor, Ambuja Cement, and it would have been
one of his
formidable
stock. I mean, almost like an all-star team. But the one stock that I always associated with him, and I think he moved the market to his opinion, was HDFC.
Oh yeah, I forgot HDFC. He would call me from New York and try to explain to me that this is too cheap and 99% of Indians don't own houses. And 99% of those guys can only do it with mortgages. So there is an open market and there's just one player out there. The guys are decent. There's everything that the government is willing to do for them. And here I was trying to look for cheaper, smaller companies. And it's crazy. I mean, it was a huge opportunity sitting out there.
Which he was the first to see. But Vinod, HDFC is a remarkable stock to have picked. How did you stumble upon it? And when you picked it, could you sleep at night because you were so excited by the prospects?
I always sleep well at night, come what may. So sleep, whatever you do in life, your sleep should be undisturbed. So
8 hours.
Okay. 8 hours. So that's okay. Yes, I looked at HDFC. One analyst, Praveen Shah, had showed up in my office. He was the head of DSP research. So among all the things he was talking, one of the things he bought one pager on HDFC. So I looked at it. I just listened. I didn't tell him what my thinking was and so on and so forth. But I said I'd like to meet Deepak Parekh. I'd like to meet the managing director, and so DSP arranged that meeting. So we met them. We understood the business. They were very kind. They explained the whole thing to us, and here was a world-class company trading at perhaps I think 2 or 3 times earnings. I mean, I forget the exact number, but certainly less than 4 times earnings.
As late as the early 80s.
This is, I think, early 90s.
Late 80s, 90s.
Right.
Early 90s. And so I spoke to lots of intelligent people. I'm humble enough to know that I could be wrong. So before, if something is so cheap, either I'm brain dead
Correct.
or someone else is.
Right.
So I always assume that I'm brain dead. And so I went around and I spoke to lots of people as to why. Why so cheap? So there were all sorts of explanations. One of them is, yaar, kuch asset nahi hai. Rented up office, rented, so everything is rented. It could close tomorrow.
Right. Employees walk home at night.
Employees walk home at night, and so those were sort of. It started off that way, and then clearly I realized that that people hadn't thought this through. That people focused disproportionately on the balance sheet rather than the sort of income statement, if you will. And so there was no doubt in my mind that the country was homeless. I mean, how could you go wrong?
Durgesh, we talked about some great investors. We talked about Radhakishan Damani, Nimish Shah, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. Great investors are associated with a stock. It's a defining stock. It's a magnum opus. It defines them. Let's go through the names. What stock would you define Nimish Shah with?
I think the big thing happened with ACC in 1992 on the long side.
The decontrol of cement?
No, that was earlier. This was after that. So just before the boom happened and as we said that from 88 to 1992 was a whole big phase.
And for the record, ACC went from 300 to 10,000 in a period of 4 years, right?
Precisely, yes.
He got that right. What did he understand about the company?
Hugely right. Typically, see, markets move in pendulums. So when we talked about Infosys also earlier, the fact was that after 92, there was a bear market, everything was down in the dumps because we went overboard.
Right.
So same thing in 1988, we had gone down to a level where things had become much cheaper than. So you go onto one side of the pendulum and then it has to. So things were too compelling and it was not possible to put up another cement plant if those were the returns that you would be getting. It wasn't possible to look at distances and
prices
it was a
started
matter
going
of
up.
time that things would come back.
Let me add a little anecdote on this.
Please.
I met the management of ACC, the managing director, when the price was 300.
Right.
Just the legendary stock of the long of Nimish.
Right.
And at 300,
The Bali Seth, I think, was the MD at that time.
the person shall go nameless.
Okay.
The first question to me was, why are you even here?
Right.
There's no future for cement.
Cement. Management itself was pessimistic.
Correct. So the biggest bear on at the bottom of the cycle that he's
Is
talking
management.
about that the most bearish at that point was the management itself.
Right. And
Sorry.
of course, the value investor, you saw opportunity there.
Correct.
Great. You also bought Ambuja, I know, which did phenomenally well over time. Let's move on to RK Damani, which is a stock, Durgesh Bhai, that you associate with him.
See, I think his moves have been so many and so good that I don't think I would want to associate any one stock for him in that sense. But his behavior, and as Vinod was talking about, his ability to listen and then filter what was happening. I think he had a unique perspective to trade and invest. It's very simple and easy to talk about. In fact, I had asked Manik Bhai that, how is it possible to do both? And he told me very simply that, क्या है उसमें दुर्गेश, जब भी ऐसा लगता है कि ये stock expensive हो गया, investment portfolio से mentally निकाल के trading portfolio में डाल देना. And I was wondering that what does he mean by that?
Yeah.
And I've seen Radhakishan do it. So I realized that what this guy is talking about, there are some people who can do it. And he had a watertight, or he still has a Chinese wall in his mind where he can trade and invest both together. So I think he has a very unique way of doing things, and probably he had this unique ability to latch on to anything that had a movement. So he also made huge amount of money in ACC. I don't think, if I'm not wrong, he must have made as much money as Nimis did. It's only that less
Maybe more than the company did at least.
lesser people know about it. So I wouldn't want to. I mean, he has been different and he always was. If you have to see his crisp statements, he would say, like at the bottom of the cycle, when you ask him, ki ye, abhi, why is this so cheap and why should you buy it? He's saying, जब चार आने में ताजमहल कभी मिलता है, जब भी किसी के पास चार आना नहीं होता तो ही तो मिलता है. So you would come up with things like, and then when you ask him about a B group, he will say कि ये बद्रीनाथ केदारनाथ है, साल में 2 महीने खुले रहता है, so make sure you get out of it. I mean, he would have such perspective on everything. It's amazing.
And the only person who management would call me, the managing director, I think, of Indian Hotels, couple of companies have called me to ask me as to who is this Mr. Damani. And
It wasn't me, clearly.
Unfortunately. Who is this Mr. Damani and can we meet him? So I checked with him, but he certainly never wanted to meet any management.
Yeah.
So, but this is a recurring theme that he's our largest shareholder, he's the most stable shareholder, and
Never calls.
he's never called.
Someone who calls, talks a lot, voluble, exciting, top of the charts, in fact, in the Forbes list, number 58, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, is obviously known for the trinity of his holy picks, taken 2003 bull market, Titan, Crystal, Lupin. Give me some color on him, Durgesh.
I think he obviously is very different, and yes, again, I would say that he is willing to share much more than even Radhakishan will for whatever you want about it.
Open book.
Absolutely. And he is also willing to say that I have a right to be wrong. So, extremely fair, extremely. However, it's very, very different. And he will be willing to take more chances. He doesn't see a reason. He says that many a times you need to have empathy in managements. You will see them change when they do well. So, he's proved it. I mean, when he bought Lupin, Lupin management was not as well regarded as it is today.
Deshbandhu Gupta.
So, he would go about saying this, that how do you know? People grow, people understand, people will change.
And lightning fast to bet. Put money on the table.
Both ways.
And remove.
Frighteningly fast.
Durgesh bhai, let me ask you, you watch not only the private players but also the public players. Give me a few names that have impressed you in the public domain.
I think as we talked about his picks early on, were very impressive. Prashant Jain has had a consistent career.
At HDFC Mutual Fund.
And I think Pulak Prasad also has done pretty well.
How's Prashant Jain's investing style impressed you? And then we'll go to Pulak Prasad.
I mean, it's just that he's been consistent. I mean, I've been seeing him for a very long time since he was in Zurich. I've seen him manage small amounts of money, large amounts of money, closed-end funds, open-end funds. And I find him having a little bit of streak of contrarianism that is required. He is willing to go out and buy PSUs when nobody else is. He has the ability to see the difficulties of a PSUs and then appreciate which ones out of those can live with the realities of life.
Good temperament, as you would put it.
I would think that apart from knowledge and is very good temperament.
Pulak Prasad comes in it from a different way, invests in a different universe of stocks. Give me a small bio on him.
He is the guy who was managing Warburg Pincus. He went into companies as a private equity guy and put money into Airtel. And he quit his job, set up a fund, and his fund is almost like designed like a private equity model, but investing into public markets. Nalanda invests. I think they have about 19-20 stocks for about $2 billion. He is clearly the second largest shareholder in most of the companies where he goes in.
And no MNC and no finance company.
No, the surprising thing is that by his internal mandate, he doesn't go into an MNC, he doesn't go into a PSU. And he's not ended up buying a finance stock, although he doesn't have that kind of a restriction on himself. Even then, he's ended up buying very good quality companies, very impressive performance. And as Vinod says, that he ends up buying very good companies and sits with them over good times and bad times.
What we'll do is we'll take a break, but when we come back, Vinod, Durgesh, I want to ask you a very interesting question. 35 years into the Indian market, Sensex gone from 100, to 30,000. I want you to take out your thinking hats and tell me, according to you, public markets, private markets, who has been some of India's greatest investors?